Alright guys, today we have a 2010 Corolla, and we're gonna change this CV axle. This is the axle down here, the axle shaft. It goes from the transmission end all the way into the spindle. And the reason we're changing this axle is because all the grease came out, and every time the customer makes a turn to the right, sharp turn, the axle makes this noise. Only on turn it makes this type of noise, click 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 noise. So that is the reason why we're going to change this axle. And to remove this axle, it's very simple. You need a few tools I'm going to show you, and those tools you're going to use to remove these three bolts that goes into this ball joint that will separate this control arm and the hub, the spindle. And then also we're gonna remove this 17mm bolt here, and we're gonna pop this tie rod off so we can move this around a little bit and get the axle out of the transmission. And the tools we're gonna need is this 32mm socket right here. It's a 12-point socket for this axle bolt. And then usually you need a cutter for a cotter pin that goes here, but in this case there's none. Somebody must have worked here before, but we are gonna put a cotter pin in there. And then this is the 17mm that will go here. You remove this bolt and this bolt, and then we'll try to get the axle out of the place. And that's about it. And I'm gonna show you step by step. And I want to show you one more thing. This thing right here, this little fella right here is touching. It's touching the little thing here. So the reason for that can be a bad shock, and we'll let that know to the customer. And yeah, that's way too far for that thing to come down to touch that. Maybe that boot doesn't belong there, I guess. Okay, so we're gonna change that axle, and I'm gonna show you step by step. Take out this socket, the nut, axle bolt nut. Go ahead. So you take out that bolt, and after that, what you do next is you take the 17. You're gonna take out this bolt here for the tie rod. Once you have that bolt out, you're gonna take a hammer and you're gonna hammer the spindle right here, and this this tie rod should just drop out. There you go, a couple of hits and that thing just drops right out. After that, we're gonna take the 17mm on the gun, and we're gonna remove these three bolts on the ball joint. One, two, three. Now the arm and the ball joint should come off, and we should be able to maneuver this spindle around and get this axle out of the spindle. And you tap the axle a little bit, see if it moves. If it doesn't move, you gotta hit it harder. Before we take out the axle from the spindle, we're gonna try to get the control arm and the ball joint out of the way. And you should be able to like do this by hand. Move this down, and with the other hand move that ball joint out of the way. Now we'll try to hit the axle in the center, see if the axle pops out. So move it back. You see that axle is coming out of its place? There you go. Now what we can do next is grab this spindle with one hand, and we'll push it that way and try to get the axle out this way so it'll slide out this way. Give it a few more hits so it's nice and loose. At the same time, try to pull this. Alright, after a couple of hits, I think it's out already loose. Now you just gotta yank the spindle back a little bit. And there you go. There you go, the axle is out of the way. Next, what we're gonna do is we're gonna pop the axle from the back. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna do one more thing. What we're gonna do is we're gonna put a bucket down here so the whatever the extra fluid is in the transmission is, it won't go on the floor. So put a container in the bottom like this one. You can use anything. And what we'll do is we'll get a pry bar and pry bar the axle out of there. Let me get my glove. Alright, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use this pry bar to pull out the axle. Shouldn't be that difficult. Sometimes it is difficult, but whatever it takes. Right, let me try to get a good angle. Alright, let it go. I want you to come back because I can't hold the camera at the same time. Bring that big one. It's more better. Yeah, I want you to do that. There you go, it's out. It's out. You come back out here, now I'm gonna pull out. So the axle is already out, and we are gonna save this axle to match up with the other axle. I think whoever put this axle before, he put a wrong axle in there. Let's see once the axle is out. And I want you to put this axle slowly on the floor. Whenever you guys put a new axle, pay attention to this ring. This little ring with teeth on it right here. I'm trying to get the right in place. So this ring right here, it's called the reflector wheel. This is for the ABS. A lot of the time that ring is wrong, and that sensor inside here, the sensor in here, it reads that. So as it turns, it reads that sensor. All it does is it gives a little metal to the magnet here. This is the sensor made out of magnet, and it does is it builds a little voltage and sends a signal to the computer, and it compares with all other 4 wheels. So now we're gonna wait for the new axle. We have the new axle. Before we put the axle in, I always like to match up the back of the axle, see if the distance is same from here to here, there to there with the old one. This was one of the problems, and somebody changed this axle. That doesn't even belong there because this axle doesn't have it, and that's just a balancer little thing there. And we're gonna check out this ring here. This ring looks different, but we're gonna see if the diameter is the same. Does it look same? Like the thickness of it? Like thickness? Sometimes what you could do is you could wrap something around it, see what's the distance all around.
Looking at the same spot.
Yeah, it looks the same. It looks the same. Alright, so we're gonna put that in. Do me a favor, what we're gonna do is get a string or something, we'll put all around it just to measure the distance all around, and same thing here. I'm gonna take this axle shaft, we're gonna slide it in there. This axle slides right in, and I I'll help him a little bit, get it in the center. Down. Hold on. I got no gloves. Feel if you get grabbed. There you go. That's it. Once you have the axle in the hole there, what you do is let go of this axle, let it go there. Go get a hammer, the rubber hammer. The rubber hammer, the mallet. No, the big one, the big one. So you want to hit this axle right here, but with the rubber. You need a rubber hammer. So what you do is, he's gonna hit it, and I'm gonna let him know when this axle goes in. Go ahead, hit it harder. There you go, it clicked right in. That's it, it's done. Now he can take the axle and stick it in the spindle hole. There you go, it's in. And the last thing before he puts any bolt in, not yet. We're gonna put this ball joint back in its place. What you do is simply pull the arm down, or you're gonna have to get them both of those together. You gotta go back out. And you take the 3 bolts, 2 nuts and 1 bolt, put it back in its place. One, 2. Get the third one. That's enough. We can do it with the gun. Couple of threads. There you go. And at the same time, he can get the tie rod in there and put the 17 nut on the top. We're gonna tighten that up. And remember the cotter pin is missing. We'll put a cotter pin in there now. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna take the axle nut. This one might be different, so we're gonna use a new one. And we're gonna need another socket, maybe 32mm socket, 6-point socket. We'll go grab that. Alright, so we're gonna take the impact gun and we're gonna tighten the 3 bolts on the ball joint. 1, 2, 3. And don't forget the tie rod bolt. We'll put a cotter pin in there. Can you line that with the... line. Yep. You want to line the bolt so you can put the cotter pin through. A new cotter pin. Put the cotter pin through and bend it. That's a safety so the bolt doesn't become loose. And the last thing is we're gonna tighten that bolt, but we need a new socket now. Since this is a 6-point and the one we took out was a 12-point. And then after that, we're gonna take a screwdriver or a chisel. See that little groove in there, right there? Let me put the light down so I can show you. This is the lock for the axle bolt. If you're gonna, once it's tight, this bolt is nice and tight, you torque it down, tighten it, whatever the best way to do it. Make sure you do it with a torque spec according to the... Alright, so let's see if this fits. That's too big, I think. No, that doesn't fit. It's a 29 or something.
It's turning. I think it's turning.
No, it's not. Is it? So this is a 32 6-point. Alright, go ahead, tighten it. So we're gonna tighten that, then we'll torque it and we'll come right back once it's torqued and everything. So now we're gonna lock up the bolt for the axle. All you do is a flathead screwdriver and you bend that down. Just like that. So he has that bent down, he'll bend it a little bit more, and that's it. And that's how you replace the axle on a Corolla.